I want to bring in David Rohde, MS Now senior national security reporter. Susan Page is Washington bureau chief for USA Today. And Michael Duffin is former senior advisor for the State Department's Bureau of Counterterrorism, currently running for Congress in Virginia. Michael, asked about Kent's resignation, I want to play what Donald Trump just said.
President, your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat.
He actually said imminent threat. But, Michael, it raises the obvious question. Why would you put a guy you think is weak on security as your head of National Counterterrorism Center?
Well, Donald Trump, he values loyalty over expertise. And I don't agree with a lot of what Joe Kent has said in the past or anything, but I agree with his rationale for resigning, that this illegal war was not justified based on the intelligence, the publicly available intelligence that the intelligence community published 1 year ago in their annual threat assessment.
I do want to say that, asked about this, Caroline Leavitt just tweeted that Trump had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first, but then she went on to discuss their efforts to expand their missile and naval capability to defend their nuclear program. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't believe the American people have ever been given that evidence, that reason why Donald Trump made a decision that this was necessary, except, and he said this repeatedly, that he had a feeling. Are we missing something here?
No. When you go to war, you need to prepare months, even years. And it's apparent that the Iranian regime had been preparing for 47 years to defend itself against an Iranian attack. And the U.S., Donald Trump got us into a war based on the recommendations of Israel's prime minister. And so we need experts who stand up, speak out. And I commend Joe Kent for resigning, because it's important that the public knows that the justification for going to this war was a lie.
David, this letter was pretty brutal, again, from somebody who has been a very true Trump supporter. Big picture, how does Kent's resignation fit into the split among the MAGA base over this war that seems only to be widening?
It's a huge acceleration of that split, and it's a very high-profile thing, and I think it's a political problem for the president. And it played into some conspiracy theories that sort of echo anti-Semitism, and that he talked about Israeli officials manipulating President Trump. Kent called the war in Syria is manufactured by Israel. Don Bacon, another Republican, called that out and said good riddance to Kent, and that he wouldn't tolerate anti-Semitism. But it's Tucker Carlson, though, at the same time praised Kent for his resignation. So it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out. But again, my concern is for American national security. There is no director right now of the National Counterterrorism Center. There are concerns about retaliation related to the U.S. war with Iran. So we'll have Tulsi Gabbard testifying tomorrow here in Washington before the Senate. But, is the U.S. government, is the Trump administration prepared to protect this country as we wage war against Iran?
Well, those are going to be some of the questions we're going to hear asked of Tulsi Gabbard, without a doubt. But, Susan, the president has rejected the idea that's in this letter that Israel dragged the U.S. into war. His exact words were, if anything, I push them. Not a new claim, though, I should say, among the MAGA base. People like Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson have claimed for a while that this is Israel's war. But what's your take on that aspect of what Kent had to say and how it fits into the bigger picture that David was just talking about?
Well, in fact, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told members of Congress early on that one reason the war started when it did was because Israel was determined to go ahead with an attack. President Trump thought that would trigger a counterattack. So The White House has backed away from that explanation, but in fact, it's out there even from the Secretary of State initially. So this is, this issue of imminent threat versus a threat. Nobody says Iran is not a threat. But the idea of an imminent threat is the legal justification for going ahead with a war. So it becomes a really fundamental argument for the Trump administration to be able to make in a compelling way.
You know, Susan, Congressman Adam Smith, the ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, I should say, was among those quickly reacting to Kent's resignation. And he wrote, quote, "Logic tells us a lot more Republicans and people in the Trump administration agree with Kent, but he is the first to actually speak out." And then he asked a question that I will ask you to answer. Will that give others more space to do the same?
Well, let's hear from Tulsi Gabbard tomorrow, because we know that she's one of the people who has traditionally been very skeptical of this kind of military action. She'll be testifying before the Senate tomorrow and before the House next day. She will surely face questions about this. You know, Vice President Vance is facing questions about this, too. He has been very skeptical of foreign wars, citing his own experience in combat. And the president himself said that his vice president was less enthusiastic about this war than he was, although he denied that there was any kind of wedge between them. So this was a fundamental argument that the president made in 3 presidential campaigns. And now he faces not only criticism from Democrats who say he hasn't made the case for war, but from some members of his base, including some people he has appointed to office, about whether this was the right thing to do.
There's also an immediate question, Michael, about what happens with, for example, rising oil prices and all the things that flow from that. Prices are going up on not just gas, but food and many other things. The president was asked today about NATO allies who have rejected his calls to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And he said, "I think that NATO is making a foolish mistake." He said, "We don't need them, but they should have been there." And then he also suggested that cargo ships will be going again through the strait. He said it won't be too long before they're moving again. Is there anything to indicate that that's imminent in any way?
Absolutely not. Last July, Donald Trump, Doge, laid off 1,300 nonpartisan public servants from the State Department, and this included experts who worked on Middle East oil and gas. And so the people who would have helped advise him to make these decisions or to mitigate an economic disaster as we're facing right now are at home collecting unemployment. And so this attack on expertise, it's coming back to roost.
David Rohde, Michael Duffin, Susan Page with the breaking news. Thank you so much.